Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down It. After our 1990s miniseries review and our weekly breakdowns on Welcome to Derry, I thought it was time to return to these two films. It Chapter 1 adapts the kid's story in It, and it reintroduced a whole new generation to Pennywise. Released at the perfect time to capitalise on the phenomenon that's Stranger Things, Chapter 1 was and still might be one of King's best adaptations to date. I think my favourite will probably, always be The Shining, but stuff like Carrie, Shawshank Redemption are all incredible films. 11/22/63 is one of my favourite shows as well, and there's countless ideas he's had that I think make amazing stories. However, I think It is probably his most famous at this point. It is the highest grossing horror movie of all time, and there's clearly a reason that the studio keep going back to it. Now, I reread the book in the lead up to these breakdowns, and there's lots of little things that get hinted towards in the movie. There's also Easter eggs laced throughout the film, along with a number of Pennywise appearances. So throughout this video, we'll be breaking down the movie and talking about the book alongside it. With that out of the way though, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into It Chapter 1.
Fear.
Okay, so development on the movie started all the way back in 2009. David Kajanak was set to bring the story to the big screen, albeit in one single film. However, if you've ever read It, you can see how that would be very difficult, because it's like an entire novel's worth of book dedicated to just Stan's business and his wife, which doesn't really lead to anything. He dies in the third chapter and doesn't play into the adult story at all, really. But yeah, the book is full of stuff like that, and condensing this down is such a tough task that even the two-part television movie struggled to bring it all over. Kajanak was actually trying to get it off the ground for a decade, and he was adamant it was going to be made into an R-rated movie. However, when Warner Brothers changed the release to fall under their New Line division, he clashed with the new execs and ultimately stepped away. This then led to Cary Fukunaga being brought in to both write and direct. They basically changed it to New Line at Warner Brothers, and the worst thing is, they didn't even Warner Brother. Now it was during this they decided it would be two films, with the children and adult parts given their own movies. This is quite different from the book, as they're the stories run concurrently throughout its 1,000-page run. Characters will see something as adults, and it will immediately take them back to their childhood. The kids also go down into the sewers at the same point in the story that the adults do, and they both perform the ritual of Chud in the past and present at the same time. Does that make sense? So you're reading it and it's like the adults are doing it, and then the next paragraph the kids are doing it. Which makes for great reading, seeing both the past and present version doing it together. However, they didn't want to do that in the film. Now, Fukunaga clashed with the studio, who wanted to make it a more conventional horror. Cary wanted to do a character-driven piece that dealt with the psychological aspects of the creature and trauma that one got from living in Derry, which they weren't really too happy about. It would very much be a coming-of-age story that showed the kids turning to adults, and then as adults later down the line, they'd come back to Derry. Will Poulter was also cast as the evil clown in this version, but unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, he was unable to lock in and thus left not too long after Cary did. Cary's final word on the project was, "We invested years and so much anecdotal storytelling into it. Chase and I both put our childhood in that story, so our biggest fear was that they were going to take our script and bastardize it, so I'm actually thankful that they're going to rewrite the script. I wouldn't want them stealing our childhood memories and using that. I was honouring King's spirit of it, but I needed to update it. Thus, they turned to Annie Muschietti and replaced Pennywise with none other than Bill Skarsgård." Now, as much as I love Will Poulter, and from what I can gather, he absolutely killed the audition and they were very excited about him playing the clown. However, in this version, it's very difficult to imagine anyone else's Pennywise other than Bill. Tim Curry will always be legendary, but in terms of an updated version, I think Skarsgård does it perfectly. However, Mark Rylance, Ben Mendelsohn, Kirk Acevedo, Hugo Weaving, and Tilda Swinton were all considered for the role. Don't know why I pronounce them so badly, but moving on. The decision was also made to set this in the 80s rather than the 50s from the book. I think this worked so well for adults at the time of release, as we were all reminiscing on the 80s, and in 2017, the 80s were so hot right then. Now, what it also allowed for was the time difference between the kids' story and the adults' one to be the same distance as the one from the book. But yeah, again, 80s nostalgia was rife at the time due to Stranger Things, which they even quoted in interviews as inspiring the film. Even them just announcing Finn Wolfhard was playing Richie made it clear what they were doing. But to be fair, I think it really works. Ironically, the Duffer Brothers got rejected from directing the film, and this was due to them not carving out their name yet. They obviously went on to make Stranger Things, so it kind of worked out for the best, but yeah, you could have had those guys behind this as well. Okay, so the movie begins with stormy skies over the Warner Brothers and New Line logo. The latter features a red balloon floating up, which yeah, you get the Easter eggs with that, mate. We've often talked in our breakdowns about how Warner Brothers do this a lot with their logos, and it highlights some things about the movie. The book tells us that a storm always precedes the coming of Pennywise, and this is basically it opening the floodgates to the sewers. Now we open just like the book on the fateful day that Georgie met Pennywise. Don't know why I made it sound like a bit like a sitcom there, but there's a somber piano tune called Every 27 Years playing in the background as we pan down to Bill's house. Now, it's revealed that Bill's mother is playing this, and I don't know if I need to point it out, but Pennywise comes out of hibernation roughly every 27 years, so yeah, it's very fitting for the film. We see her playing the piano a bit later on, and they had a vision of her playing it during the miniseries. In the book, his mother's playing Fur Elise, and throughout the book, hearing this song triggers one of Bill's worst memories. This is the day his brother died. Now in the book, we open with a dedication line saying that the book's dedicated to kids, fiction is the truth inside the lie. I think looking at the story, it instantly becomes clear it's about childhood trauma and how you can often repress it for decades. However, at some point in your adulthood, it will pop back up and you'll have to confront it through therapy or something like killing the interdimensional clown who could take on the shape of anyone that hunted you throughout your town and killed lots of kids. Yeah, like that. Now, we begin with part 1 of the book, which is known as The Shadow Before. After the flood, 1957, the terror, which would not end for another 28 years, if it did ever end, begins following a boat on its journey through the rain. The work talks about how the boat should have been sunk at several points, but it stays afloat and pushes on through the rain, which ultimately leads to Georgie's death. The work tells us this is the 4th day of rain and parts of the town are starting to break off. The rain in the book was expected to cause a massive flood, which had happened before in 1931. That would have been the previous Pennywise cycle, so the rain's an omen that the eldritch demon's ready to feast once more. This rain somewhat comes full circle at the end of the story, as when Pennywise is defeated, the sewers then erupt. This storm floods the town and actually washes away big parts of Derry, so the story beginning and ending with water washing something away is very, very poetic. Now it's sort of like poetry they rhyme. Now here we meet Bill, who's making the SS Georgie out of paper. There's some cool little nods of the decade, and the posters in the room show which era that this is. There's a Gremlins poster over Bill's bed and a Beetlejuice one on his door. Both of those movies are Warner Brothers horror flicks, which are absolute bangers. The Gremlins also start off cute before becoming monsters, and Beetlejuice can shapeshift. So both fit Pennywise really well. In the book, Bill is actually sick and can't go out and play with Georgie, but in chapter 2, we learn he was just pretending.
I'd come with you if I weren't dying.
This has clearly brought on lots of guilt though, and it's why the vision of Georgie says, and I quote, "You lied and I died." Bill also hates himself because of how well he made the boat. As mentioned, if it had been terrible, Georgie would have been A-okay. Then again though, would you really want to go out and play in the rain? Would you, Georgie? Would you? Would you want to stick your head in a drain because you saw a clown down there, mate? Did you deserve to die, Georgie? Did you? Anyway, Bill tells Georgie to go and get the wax, and as he leaves, we can see Bill's hamster cage. It has an elaborate tunnel system, and it's the same one he uses later to prove to his dad that Georgie could have washed away to the Barrens. It also nicely sets up how Pennywise uses the system and is sort of a creature moving in the tunnels. The behind the scenes stuff shows the entire sewer system that they build, and it looks like a sort of giant hamster cage. Just like the book, Georgie then goes downstairs and into the scary part of the house, the basement. The book tells us he was always scared of a monster down there and was most frightened of opening the door and flicking on the light. It doesn't work though, and the book explains that the power's out due to the rain. We then get the first jump scare as Bill tells him to hurry up by their radio. He grabs the golf wax just like the book and sees what looks like 2 silver eyes. In the story it said Pennywise's silver dollar-like eyes, which is why they first appear blue down the drain. As Georgie backs up, we can also see a fishing net tool behind him, which is in the shape of a balloon. Even the handle appears similar to the string. The eyes turn out to be just glass spheres, but it may have been Pennywise lurking in the darkness. There were yellow eyes in there, the sort of eyes he'd always imagined but never actually seen down in the basement. Now the book does confirm that he does indeed hear it. He would hear it. Something worse than all the commies and murderers in the world. Well, if you listen to Shore at the army base, mate, nothing's worse than the commies. As we know though, it manifests into what kids fear the most. So this happening to Georgie here actually explains why Pennywise appears in the storm drain. He's underground, just like the basement, and has similar eyes to the glass spheres that scare him here. But yeah, I could be reaching. Either way, Georgie runs upstairs to bring the paraffin wax to his brother. In the book, this actually had a turtle on the label, which added him some comfort, and was obviously a nod to maturing. Bill then stutters while saying you call both she, and his stutter plays a big part in the story. Jaden Lieberher, who plays Bill, actually watched the King's Speech to learn how to pull it off, and you know what, I think he does alright with it. He had been hit by a car when he was 3 and knocked into the side of a building. He had remained unconscious for 7 hours. Mum said it was that accident which had caused the stutter. George sometimes got the feeling that his dad, and Bill himself, were not so sure. Georgie then heads out to play with a boat as Bill looks guilty. The sort of survivor's guilt that will stick with him for the rest of his life. Now Georgie has a yellow raincoat on just like in the books, but he's wearing green wellies as opposed to the red ones which are in the story. Comment below if we're being too thorough and I'll stop. Either way, this intro is absolutely unforgettable, and in both adaptations, I think it's the standout scene. King said he knew the movie would be good from just this sequence alone, and it became clear from the intro that Muschietti understood the material. Just like the book, we then see the orange barriers, and Georgie loses pace with the boat. In the book, he says, shit and shinola, but as this isn't in the 1950s, he just says, Bill's gonna kill me. Which, bear with me, is true, as Pennywise is played by Bill Skarsgård. We then get our first look at the creature and hear the iconic line, "Hiya, Georgie." Pennywise has that, unforgettable smile, and Skarsgård would actually manipulate his lips to look incredibly creepy. This is something he's apparently done since he was a child. The false teeth also pushed his mouth out, and this caused Skarsgård to drool. Now, they started off like, oh mate, I'm drooling all the time. However, they realized this was actually a bit creepy and a bit like a predator, and thus they decided to keep it as part of the character. And I do wonder if it kind of influenced Sinners, as there we of course see Rennick drooling just before he kills. Now, though Tim Curry's absolutely unforgettable, Muschietti aimed to make this Pennywise more edgy, unpredictable and mad. It's a big difference from the miniseries version where he was simply a clown who sounded like he smoked like 200 cigarettes a day.
Very wise of your dad, Georgie. Very wise indeed.
Bill and Andy wanted to make Pennywise more childlike, which included cheek prosthetics and at times those baby blue eyes. They were actually Skarsgård's real ones, but they switched to orange when he's just about to attack. In the book, Georgie actually noticed they were yellow and was confused to why they changed to blue. Now, the novel mentions that the blue is just like Bill and his mother's eyes, and it's something Pennywise does to make him more at ease. It's kind of like luring the kid in with a face he can trust, and one of the biggest manipulations that the shapeshifter does. The eyes then switch to orange, which I feel is a precursor to the Deadlights. Now, in our miniseries breakdown, we talked about how Pennywise was inspired by Clarabelle the Clown and Ronald McDonald. However, the costume here was inspired by Renaissance paintings, and the production wanted to make him truly seem like a clown out of time. The lines also go up from his lips, which makes it look like his smile is floating, so yeah, it's quite a cool character design. Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. were the ones behind the effects, and they'd also worked on things like Aliens and Predator, which breakdowns on the channel now. There's a head prosthetic that makes the top of his head seem much bigger, and I tried looking into what inspired the now iconic makeup, but honestly, I don't think they really looked at anything specific and just kind of went with what would look creepy, which does make it fit perfectly with the story. Pennywise also constantly mentions floating, and something we see literally as the poor kids are floating in the cistern down the sewers. In the book, the float lines were because the kids were found face down in the water with their bodies looking like an animal attack. Just like the novel, he then introduces himself as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. He also mentions his nickname Bob Gray, which is a nod to cannibal and child killer Albert Fish. As he does a little jig, we can also hear his bells.
Well, I'm Pennywise the Dancing Clown.
It's kind of like Morris dancers or Indian Kathak dancers who all wear bells on their legs. It might also be a reference to the book where Georgie thought Pennywise looked like Clarabelle the Clown. It was Clarabelle. We can also see the bells in Welcome to Derry, and they're in the hair of the kid in episode 3. Next we see a woman heading outside, and she sees Georgie looking down the storm drain. In the book, this was actually Dave Gardner who came running out when Georgie screamed out. The woman doesn't check to see if he's okay though, which you might think's weird, and she kind of turns around like, oh whatever, I don't care. But yeah, like surely an adult would make sure a kid wasn't playing in the drain in a storm like this. Now, there is a reason for this. As in the book, we learn the adults of Derry are corrupted by Pennywise's appearance, and they turn a blind eye to all manners of evil. This is why the car later drives past Ben as Henry's cutting his name into his stomach, and we can see a balloon pop up in the back. In general though, the adults and, well, parents across the board are awful to their children. Eddie's mum is Munchausen by proxy, and Bev's dad is an absolute nonce. In the book, her mum still lives with him, and she asks Bev outright if her dad ever touches her. There he doesn't, but I feel like Machete used that line to give the character a much, much darker side. As such though, the woman here doesn't bother to check in on Georgie. Pennywise then says how the storm blew him away and the whole circus is down there. This kind of sets up how his circus wagon's down there as well, and this appears through a lot of his appearances. Georgie replies by saying he can smell the circus, but the book divulges a bit more. He says that though he can kind of get the hints of the popcorn, there's also the smell of damp decaying leaves from the sewer, highlighting that there's something else down there other than the pleasant image that he's painting. It then gets very unsettling as Pennywise stops laughing, which of course scares Georgie. You can also see that his eyes begin looking in different directions. Andy Machete actually wanted to do this effect digitally, but then Bill Skarsgård saved them loads of money on CGI and showed he could do it himself. In fact, most of the stunts and physicality are done by Skarsgård himself, and they didn't really have to use much digital trickery beyond like him turning into a spider and stuff. Now Georgie then becomes afraid, which is what Pennywise wants, as in the book it says it salts the meat. We know this because there's a chapter in the story that's actually from Pennywise's point of view. Goes on to explain that it had attacked older kids and adults, but their fears were far more complex. The children's fears were simple and much more powerful. And that's why the beast always targets kids instead of just going after any random person it could find. Now, as we learn in Welcome to Derry, this taste is also triggered by the adrenal gland and it gives better tasting flesh. So Pennywise will always try and scare its prey first before just out and out attacking. The idea of children's energies being more potent is also explored in King's book Dr. Sleep. The true not kill children who shine, as the steam that comes out of them is seen as being purer. Their bodies aren't rife with chemicals like alcohol and drugs, and to these creatures, it just makes it taste better. Beyond that, kids having a strong psychic connection is something that thematically Stephen King does a lot. That's why in a lot of his works, his kids have wildly strong psychic powers. See Firestarter, for example, and Carrie. Now, witnesses who came forth and said they saw this attack did say they spotted someone in the drain. However, the county sheriff didn't believe them. He said the current in the drains was so strong that even Hercules himself would have been swept away by the water. So it again highlights the supernatural side of Pennywise. Georgie's arms then chewed off as we see the real teeth of the creature. This reminds me of when a shark's eyes roll back and it then reveals its teeth. In between it, we cut to like the cutest cat I've ever seen, and I don't know why they do this, but it just juxtaposes the horror really well. We also have the street sign which says Witcham and Jackson. This is mentioned in the book by name, and in what's a coincidence, Georgie is played by Jackson Robert Scott. It's a truly shocking and gut-wrenching scene though, as Georgie's taken below the storm drain and down into the sewers. Now the book is a fair bit different at this moment, as Georgie's body was just left there in the street. As mentioned, the guy hears the screams and then runs out to help, only to find that the boy's already died from blood loss. This means that Bill's urge to find his brother is only in the movie and not in the book. Even in the miniseries, we then cut to Georgie's funeral, but I did like that Machete changed it, as finding his brother becomes more of a goal. And ultimately, it's much more devastating when he learns the truth in the end. Now, they actually did a pretty funny deleted scene for this moment that is found on the Blu-ray.
Thanks. See you later. Bye.
Shit.
Now at this moment, the book follows Georgie's boat on its journey out of Derry. That journey, I suspect, inspires our trip through the Barrens, and we then arrive in June 1989. However, the story says the boat dipped and swayed and sometimes took on water, but it did not sink. The two brothers had waterproofed it well. I do not know where it finally fetched up, if it ever did. Perhaps it reached the sea and sails there forever, like a magic boat in a fairy tale. All I know is that it was still afloat and still running on the breast of the flood when it passed the incorporated town limits of Derry, Maine, and there it passes out of this tale forever. Which is a very, very poignant way to end the chapter. Now from here, we then cut to Mike at his grandfather's farm. In the book, we actually go to Adrian Mellon's murder at this point, which is what opens up chapter 2. It's actually one of the best chapters of anything I've ever read. It works really well in the standalone thing, and we'll talk about that more in our breakdown for that movie. So make sure you're subscribed. In that, Mike then realizes that it's happening all again, and he decides from this point to make the calls to his childhood friends. So going to Mike is a nice little nod to the original structure of the story. He's working in the farm and culling animals, and you can see that he hesitates when it comes to using the bolt gun. He's scolded by his grandfather Leroy, who is a major character in Welcome to Derry, along with Mike's father Will. In the book, Mike actually lives with Will and has a pretty decent life on the farm. For this though, Mike's parents are dead, and we learn they burned in a fire. The bolt gun as well plays a big part in Mike's growth from a meek child to a badass. Specifically because he uses this gun later on when facing off against Pennywise. Here, Leroy uses the sheep as a lesson to explain how brutal and cold the world can be.
You can be out here like us, or you can be in there, like them.
Mike must either kill or be killed, and this does hint to Leroy's past and how violent that it was. He of course lost his son, and is basically trying to train him rough to make him tough. Now in the book, Mike's dad told him that he can't run away from Henry all of the time, and he has to stand up to him. Due to his race, he explains that he'll always be a target for people like Henry and his father, which Leroy experienced firsthand. In the text, we learn they have a history with the family, and the Bowers burned down the chicken house on the farm. The police then investigated it, and Bowers basically expected them to turn a blind eye, but in the end, they actually sided with the Hanlons. This led to Butch Bowers then being forced to pay compensation to the family. So from then on, Bowers hated him, and he passed this hatred of the Hanlons onto his son, who then would torment Mike non-stop at school. And for me, Mike's probably the character I think the film lets down the most. In the book, Mike's dad teaches him all about Derry's history, and this is crucial in taking down Pennywise both times. However, that fascination with history is given to Ben, and he loses one of the main parts of his character. But I do feel like they're trying to make right on that with Welcome to Derry and give the Hanlons much more of a role. Either way, we then move on to meet the bulk of the Losers Club as school is out for summer. Here we catch Eddie talking about Stan's bar mitzvah, which was a sort of running thing in the book. The kids are quite confused by his religion though, and stuff like circumcision, which I remember, being a kid, stuff like that we talk about like every single day. Just anything involving dicks, when you were a kid, you're like, oh, talk about wanking today. But yeah, Stan isn't that much of a practicing Jew in the book, which was obviously changed for the film. In the source material, he just goes to the synagogue sometimes, but yeah, his father's a rabbi and he's wearing a kippah, which is also known as the yarmulke. Now Stan discusses that he'll become a man after his bar mitzvah, and we see this as a turning point in the movie where he finally grows up and decides to go off and face off against the clown. It also gets expanded upon later in chapter 2, and they actually use one of the deleted scenes from this movie there. His speech was supposed to be in this, but after they cut it, they just added it to the sequel. We can also hear Love Removal Machine by The Cult playing over the top. It's an absolute banger of a tune that singer Ian Astbury said was like getting on your favourite motorcycle. Riding a bike usually goes hand in hand with freedom, so these kids busting out of school for a summer of adventures and riding their bikes feels very, very apt. They're all smiles and having a good time, and then they walk past Henry Bowers and his gang. And these are some of both the book and movie's big villains. From left to right is Patrick Hockstetter, Belch Huggins, Henry himself, and also Victor Criss. Henry is played by Nicholas Hamilton, who also featured in King's Dark Tower Adaptation, which was released in the same year. We can also see Belch is wearing an Anthrax t-shirt with the album cover for Among the Living on it. This is an amazing Easter egg, as the titular track is all about Randall Flagg, who is a character in King's novel The Stand, and many more books beyond that. Another track on the album is titled A Skeleton in the Closet, which is also about King's story apt pupil. I can't say I would go moving on. I've tried the line 500 times. Apt pupil. Can't say apt pupil. We're moving on. The album title could also be used here as a nod to the idea that evil incarnate is amongst them and living in Derry. Belch also wears a Metallica shirt much later at the apocalyptic rock fight, which has the metal up your ass design, which was the original name of their album Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All is also a very deep cut, as this is something Pennywise said to Henry in the book when he finally freed him from the asylum. The back has a man being electrocuted, which might also be a deep cut King Easter egg. Ride the Lightning's album name was inspired by The Stand, and in that book a character refers to being executed via electric chair as riding lightning. Music is also mentioned as being something that Henry loved. He hated listening to baseball on the radio and would have preferred rock and roll instead. It was something that the kids actually had in common with him, but with this being the 80s, the metalheads have taken over and they're now the scary ones. And R.I.P. Belch, you would have loved deathcore. Patrick's story is also very different in the book, but we will get to that when he gets killed later on. Yay! The kids look sheepish as they pass the bullies, and we meet Greta Keane. Things play out here differently from the story, as in that she's Greta Bowie and isn't the daughter of Mr. Keane. In that she's also from the rich part of the town and despises Beverly and looks down on her for being poor. She can't understand that despite having the best clothes and doing her hair, the boys prefer Beverly. As she comes in, you can also see the corkboard with posters of the missing children. Lauren Batcher in the top right worked as a set dresser on the movie, and Darlene Abbott also worked in production and financing. Can't read the others, and I even watched this on a 55-inch 4K OLED, mate, but I can't make out the names, so I apologise. But if that's you who worked on the movie, comment below. But yeah, because of how they use it in Welcome to Derry as well, where it's all the name of the production designers and stuff, I'm guessing that's exactly who this is, so congratulations on working on a great movie. Now, she then goes to confront Bev, who's smoking in a toilet cubicle. The hatred here apparently centers on Beverly being a slut, which is a rumour that was started by Henry Bowers, which he does allude to in the rock fight in the book. It also juxtaposes the way her dad is creepily attracted to his daughter, and it paints her out as having a really tragic life where she's abused at home and then also abused at school. If you've been watching Welcome to Derry as well, then you'll probably notice that the patty cakes were inspired by Greta's group, and the stuff that they don't get to include in this movie, they've basically given to them. We then see the Derry Police Department sign which says, "Remember the curfew, 7 p.m. The 7 is red, aka the colour of Pennywise, which gives a little visual nod as to who's causing this to be in effect. This is something which was in the books, but that was described as being on posters around the town. I love how the kids all just throw their books in the bin though, and haven't you heard of recycling? You might also need these very soon. Summer's not that long. But yeah, 6 or 7 week holiday, mate. That seemed like forever when you were a kid. They then discuss how they want to spend the summer, and it's a scene filled with optimism. Richie wants to play Street Fighter, which is something we see him play later, and he also does it during the flashbacks in Chapter 2. We learn Eddie wants to hit the thumbs up, and Stan wants to go to the quarry. However, Bill wants to go to the Barrens and look for his brother. Even when they talk about the other murdered kids, he does correct it by saying that they're just missing.
In a ditch, all decomposed, covered in worms and maggots, smelling like Eddie's mom's underwear.
She's not dead, she's missing.
This is because Betty Ripson's mother's waiting at the school for her daughter and clearly can't handle that she's gone, which kind of reflects Bill. You can also see Henry Bowers' dad behind her to the right. As mentioned, Oscar was a dirt poor farmer in the book as opposed to the policeman that we see here. He's obviously following in his father's footsteps though, and in Welcome to Derry, yeah, he's the county sheriff, or the sheriff of the town, whatever. I ain't American, mate, get out of here. Now in the book, Betty was presumed to be the first person to be killed, and her body was gutted and found frozen near Outer Jackson Street. However, the movie opts to make the kids missing, which I think works better with the idea that the kids are floating in the sewers. The Ripsons play a much bigger part in the story, and in the book, Mike even interviews Betty's dad when the murders start up again. All this is cut short though as the Bowers gang arrives and causes trouble for the kids. I did chuckle as Henry was pulling Richie's backpack, and it was like that meme of Darkseid and Superman. Patrick then throws Stanley's yarmulke away after calling him a flamer, and Belch lives up to his name, which is disgusting. Bill's then called a loser, and it foreshadows the name of the group. What are we, some kind of losers club? That sort of thing. Now, we do learn that due to Georgie's death, that Henry's basically left him alone for a year. But you only get a year, mate. That's all I'll feel bad for, and I'm gonna beat the shit out of you now. Luckily for Bill though, Henry's intimidated by his father. In the book, he's abusive, racist, and also a bit psychotic. Like so psychotic, people in town stay away from him. This psychosis was also passed on to his son, and Henry even tried to make his dad proud by poisoning Mike's dog, which in the book is called Mr. Chips. We of course get a hint to how much he hates his son later on when he shoots his gun in Henry's direction. The gang then get in a Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, just like Smokey and the Bandits. It's a great bit of filmmaking that really highlights the gap in social standing between the two groups. The horrible kids have a badass car while the nice kids ride their bikes around the town. Speaking of bikes, we then meet Ben, who has one of the most 80s bikes I've ever seen. He's also holding a diorama of the Derry Standpipe, which is a location that's mentioned heavily in the book. This was based off the Thomas Hill Standpipe in Bangor, and this is what they use for the postcards that Ben sends later on, and it's also what Bill appears in front of later. It's a place where families would have picnic at and go up onto the viewing deck. However, after some kids drowned inside of it, it was closed to the public for good. It does of course feature heavily in Welcome to Derry, where it's used as a clubhouse, similar to how the Losers Club have their base in the Barrens. It might also be featured here, as in the book at this point, Ben thinks he felt as tall as the Standpipe and as wide as the whole town. Ben's chapter is the next one in the novel, and that begins with his adult self going to a bar. I'll talk about that more in chapter 2, but he basically recounts his childhood at the barman before deciding to set off to Derry. It's called Ben Hanscom Takes a Fall, and it's about him going over the edge and going into the Barrens, which is where he meets his friends. Now in the book, we learn Henry's been looking for him for a while because Ben wouldn't let him cheat off his test. This led to him being put in summer school, and his dad also beat him. This wasn't because Oscar was mad at his kid being a dummy though, but because he needed Henry to work on the farm. However, with that farm cut, we miss out on some vital context as to why Ben's being targeted.
Everyone knows he's looking for you.
Now in the book, he thinks about how if he makes it through summer without seeing him, he'll be out of junior high and then won't see Henry again. Henry will be kept back another year and Ben will be off living his best life. It's here though that Ben develops his crush on Bev. In the book, he observes everything about her from the way her hair is down to her bracelets. As we see her writing in the book, we can even see him focusing on pretty much every detail of the character. In the book, as he's walking home, he also mutters Beverly Hanscom and clearly falls in love with her from this moment. He's listening to You Got It, The Right Stuff by New Kids on the Block, and Bev jokes that she gets it, insinuating he's a new kid and that's why he's listening to them. But yeah, sorry Ben mate, New Edition clears him every time. But yeah, from this meeting we get that he's a loner as there's no signatures in his yearbook. She then says to hang tough, to which he replies, please don't go girl, both of which are New Kids on the Block songs.
That's the name of another New Kids on the Block song.
Yeah, we know mate, I've just said that. Right after this in the book, he's then attacked by Henry, but instead for the film, we then cut to Bill. Pushing his bike along the street, we can see the name Silver on it, which does come from the story. To amp himself up, get in the mood to be a hero, he used to shout, "Hi-ho Silver," which was of course the Lone Ranger's saying. It's actually given a nod to in this movie, and we do hear it on the TV at the library as the Losers Club ride by. We can also hear him stuttering and trying to say he thrusts his fist against the post and insists he still sees the ghosts. It's something he was taught to use to get over his stutter, and it made him feel confident. He said this when he first defeated Pennywise, and when his stutter came back when he was older, he'd also repeat it there. Now his dad isn't happy with him as he asks Bill to stop looking for Georgie and says that he's dead, which, whoa, spoiler alert mate. But yeah, again, it's something that Bill refuses to accept. We don't actually see his parents much past this scene, but there were actually a few deleted scenes involving them. The first of these was that they were going to have dinner after Georgie's death, and the second was that his dad would check for Bill in the basement after Pennywise locked him down there. This would have been revealed to have been flooded, but Bill's dad couldn't see the water. Much like how Bev's dad can't see the blood in the bathroom. I do like this lack of parents though, and the only ones we see are absolutely awful. It hammers home that the Derry curse has consumed the adults, and it strips away your optimism. We then cut to Mike, who's taking the farm's meat to the butcher's. It's a location featured in Welcome to Derry, and his grandmother brought produce from there as well. This was during her first trip to the city, and it's our first time seeing Mike going through it too. So it's kind of like poetry they rhyme. He's delivering the meat in red packages as well, much like how Stanley the Cleaver handed them off to his mother. Now in the film, Mike's a homeschool kid, but in the book, he went to Neobold Street Church School. As he stops his bike, we can also see Tony's barbershop. I've always seen this as a nod to Tony from The Shining, especially as Dick Halloran features in the book, as I'm sure you know at this point. Unfortunately for Mike, Henry and co spot him from the car and then chase after him. This is the same alleyway where the kids patch up Ben, and it's a place of strength that Pennywise later infects. Further dating us, in 1989 are the movies showing at the Capitol Cinema, which has since reopened. There's Batman and also Lethal Weapon 2.
Diplomatic community.
Keaton also of course starred in Beetlejuice as well, and he's so hot right then. And yeah, Batman is also owned by Warner Brothers. Pennywise then taunts Mike by showing him his parents burning in the apartment fire. Now this change is odd because yeah, Will's in the book quite a lot. However, I don't think Muschietti was planning on doing the black spot at the time, and he may have thought this was his only chance to reference it. In the book, Will was caught up in that fire, and though he escaped, it may be playing off that. Just before Mike removes the parcels from the bike's basket, we can also see a mural that shows the Bradley Gang massacre. This is part of the 1935 cycle when a group of gangsters came to the town to buy more ammo. They were on the run, but the gun store owner recognized them and tricked them into staying and coming back another day. Between then and the gang's return, he then rounded up every man in the town to basically just stand and shoot them, which is a tactic they also do in Dr. Sleep, and I'm telling you it works. Now some witnesses claim to see Pennywise there just floating outside of a building, and he was shooting as well and diving out the window like he was from the Matrix or something. That was of course shown in the intro to Welcome to Derry, and the gang itself were based off the real life Brady gang. Now, we know that Pennywise was involved in both of these events because of things that we see later down the line. When Mike looks at a photo of the news report of his parents' death in chapter 2, we can see that the fire forms the word it. As for the Bradley gang, Pennywise later ends up appearing in the mural. When the kids first arrive to patch up Ben, we can't see anyone under the tire of the car. However, later in the scene, we can see Pennywise sitting there, revealing he was involved in them both. Pennywise then reveals himself to Mike, complete with orange eyes. However, luckily, Mike's kind of saved by Bauer's gang, who shows up and, shout at him and basically be dickheads. At the moment, they're playing the song 666 by Anvil, and 666 reference the devil, mate, you know that one. We then cut to Stanley, who's practicing his Torah reading. As mentioned earlier, this part is all new for the movie, including this scene. His father was in Welcome to Derry, and Stan's uncle Theodore was a victim of Pennywise in the 50s. Yeah, stuff like this is often a problem with prequels, but luckily, we can explain it away, because there's a Derry curse that gives everyone amnesia. We then see as Stanley's framed as being behind bars, which gives the illusion that he's caught in a prison. And yeah, you can apply that to the character. He doesn't really have much interest in his religion, but has to because of his father. Mr. Urias is framed as being above him, so Stan feels small and below him. It also shows that his father literally looks down on him. Now sadly, Stanley is a bit underdeveloped in the movie, as his hobbies such as birdwatching are not included in the film. They are very important to the character though, and at one point he even manages to hold off Pennywise by simply reciting bird names.
I'm not going to make any tit jokes.
But yeah, here he's a rather simple character. And that might even be because he doesn't return to Derry during chapter 2. The pressure is then shown later in the scene as he walks into the office and the Star of David is literally shining down on him. We also see how Stanley's terrified of the painting in his dad's office. Annie Muschietti has said that the paintings of Amedeo Modigliani inspired both this and his previous movie Mama. The director also apparently had a similar painting as a child, which used to freak him out. And yeah, it's a very creepy painting, and I don't know why you'd hang this up anywhere. They also kind of develop how Stan has OCD, and despite his fear, he still straightens the picture up. This is a little thing that builds his character that shows he can face his fears and doesn't let them get the better of him. In the book, he was integral to cleaning up Bev's bathroom, and the movie does portray him as being quite methodical when he spends ages cleaning the window. The woman in the painting then becomes real and chases after him as we cut to the rest of the kids. They're stocking up to go to the sewers, and we see just how much medication Eddie's mum has. On the table is a massive daily pill pot, and Richie opens the cupboard to find more medicine than Keen's pharmacy. As mentioned earlier, his mother has a form of Munchausen by proxy where she pretends that Eddie's sick so she retains control over his life. The book goes into great detail about it, and Mr. Keen even just puts a placebo in his inhaler. We even see things from his point of view, and basically I was thinking like, yeah, this is just all water, the kid's not having an asthma attack at all. Does fit in the theme with most of their parents having some sort of abuse and desire for control though, and you can kind of see this as being like them keeping the kids safe in their own twisted way. As with Belcher's t-shirt, Bill's one here references a building in the book. There was a baseball field outside of Tracker Brothers truck depot, and Stan and Belch would actually play there. Eddie then picks up his inhaler and wants to know where the boys are going. His mother would never let him go to the sewers, however the TV says, this show is on TV on almost every screen in Derry, and we learn it's part of Pennywise's control. At one point, the host even tells the viewer to go play in the sewers.
The sewer is a fun place to play with all of your friends. Just follow the water into the drains and down into the sewer you go. When you're with your friends in the sewers, you can be as silly as a clown. That's right.
So the kids are being guided towards the sewers and told how it's fun to play there. And you'll all float as well. The kids then pass by the library as Ben's writing his love letter. This haiku is something he comes up right after meeting her in the book, and he gleefully says it to himself as he walks down the street. Later, Bev gets confused by who sent it, and thinks at first that Bill might be the author. As we know, he goes on to become a writer later on, and even years in the future, she still thinks it's from him. But that's the problem with sending anonymous letters, mate. Do better, Ben. Did all the work for the lad. In the book, we learn he got his postcard from the librarian and decided to send it to his crush. Here though, she's a bit of a dickhead and basically looks down on him for spending all his summer in the library. She then gives him a history book and Ben turns the page as we see sawmill workers. In the book, we learn there used to be a big logging industry near Derry, and this was kind of adapted into the Paul Bunyan story for the town. One of the workers, named Claude Heroux, ended up killing a load of men in a bar, and Mike's dad also drank with the lumberjacks during the 1930s. So I love this attention to detail here. This scene with the lumberjacks was actually in the script, so it is kind of a shame that we never got to see it. There's also a massacre in 1851 where a load of lumberjacks were found dead in a cabin. Mike thought that Hero's massacre set off Pennywise's terror around that time, which also included the ironworks explosion. That's what Ben looks at next, and we can see the date of 1908. That's the year a young Shaw went to the circus, and in the photo you can see Pennywise's cardigan. Behind Ben, we then see as one of the librarians turns and starts staring very creepily at him. As we pointed out in a number of our breakdowns, this is actually Pennywise in disguise. This birthed my greatest thumbnail ever and is responsible for a lot of the channel's success. So thank you, Andy, I really appreciate it. Ben then flicks to the next photo, which has another hidden Pennywise. If you look very closely in the top left, you will see the figure, though he is quite blurred. We then learn how the ironworks blew up and killed 102 people. Kids' body parts were found all over the town, including trees, which we do see in the album. We also have a photo of adults' bodies lying on the floor, which was a real-life photo from Gettysburg. The production used photos from that war and basically just photoshopped eggs around the body. If I ever get killed in a battle, use me in a horror movie and photoshop Easter eggs around me. That'll be its own little Easter egg. As Ben gets closer to the truth, we then see as the librarian's now a lot closer and staring at him. This is because he's discovering the past and one of the biggest tragedies in the town and basically becoming scared, which Pennywise can't resist. The ironworks was a major thing that sent the town into a stage of grief, as pretty much everyone knew at least one person who died there. We then see the newspaper which says, "Body found by canal, not Betty Ripson." Now this might be a rewriting of Eddie Cochran's story in the book. His younger brother Oliver apparently fell from a ladder and died, and Eddie was thought to have run away because of it. However, his disappearance sparked some new interest in the case, and they exhumed Oliver and realised he'd been abused by their stepfather. Thus his death and Eddie's disappearance got pinned on his dad. In reality, he was simply killed by Pennywise, who appeared to Eddie in the form of the creature from the Black Lagoon. You get a whole chapter from Eddie's perspective and see him running through the woods, nearly getting there, and at the last second getting pulled back by Pennywise, and it's quite haunting. We then see the trademark red balloon, and it lures Ben to a smouldering egg, which of course plays off the ironworks. We can also see a painting at the end of the hallway which appears to be a Native American camp. It's explained in chapter 2 that the local Americans used the ritual of Chur to defeat Pennywise, or at least they thought they did, as they were killed when trying to do it. But I do wonder if this picture is referencing them, and as we've seen in Welcome to Derry, you know, the Native Americans have a strong presence in the town. The kids' laughter then taunts Ben, just as the sound of kids is used to taunt Bev later in her bathroom. The boy from earlier, who got a bit headless, he comes down the stairs and then chases after Ben, and even makes fun of his weight.
You'd better run, Egg!
It leads him out of his haven and into the clutches of Henry and his crew. Henry calls him Tits, which is something a kid called him just before this in the book. Now Victor Chris wants to light Ben's hair on fire, just like Michael Jackson's. This is a call back to the 1984 Pepsi commercial where Jackson's hair was accidentally set alight. When Henry cuts Ben's stomach, you can also see Belch looks very, very shocked. During this attack in the book, we actually get some insight into his friend's thoughts, and most of them are shocked by how far that he's going. Like, they start thinking he's a psychopath. That is, everyone except Patrick Hockstetter. Now this is expanded a lot more on the work, and in that, he's said to have had solipsism syndrome. I think I got that pronunciation right. Now, but this is where someone thinks there's no reality beyond their own mind. Patrick thought that everyone else was just a figment of his imagination, and he had actually killed before. We learned that he'd murdered his baby brother, and this was because he was getting more attention than him. He and Henry also help each other out. Look, you can figure it out, you know what I'm saying. They skip over all of that for the movie though, and instead just keep things simple for the film. Ben then manages to escape by falling backwards, and he tumbles into the barrens. In the book, he kind of sees this as being a positive, and he was able to use his weight to push against Henry and help break the fence. Henry then loses his knife, which actually belongs to his dad. Ben then passes by a sewer spout, which is likely what alerts Pennywise. It's probably drawn towards the smell of Ben's fear, and then the rest of the group splitting up isolates them all. Who isn't splitting up though is the Losers Club, and we join them entering a sewer tunnel. Here the lads are investigating Bill's idea that his brother could have ended up in the tunnels. However, in the book, they were actually building a dam, only for it to end up being destroyed by Henry's goons. Ben eventually then came across them and offered them help to build it, which sort of played into his interest in architecture. This is actually a big part of his career going forward, and in the book, it turns out he built the BBC building, which he revealed was actually just Derry's public library turned on its side. Now we see that when it comes to the sewers, Stan and Ed are petrified of going in, and they hang back at the entrance. Eddie, you know, is obviously a clean freak, but with Stan, it kind of foreshadows him not wanting to come back to Derry when he's older. Richie and Eddie are hilarious together though, as the former does a lot of different impressions. It's something he does a lot in the book, and a lot of them were very, let's say, of the time, shall we say. In the book, in the book, they're a bit racist, mate. In general, I do think Richie is very, very annoying in the story. And if you listen to the audiobook, mate, fucking hell. But yeah, I think in the film, he's actually quite good. And even better in chapter 2. Now, it's here one of Bill's theories is confirmed as he comes across Betty Ripson's shoe.
How do you think Betty feels? Running around these tunnels with only one freaking shoe?
We see visions of her a few times throughout the movie, including her torso at Neobolt Street. They also bring her back in a really subtle way in chapter 2, which I will talk about, so make sure you subscribe. Bill then tries to guilt trip the others to come in with him, deeper into the sewers, and it's the classic hero's journey into the abyss. Stanley again though hints at his reluctance to go, and he just wants to have a very simple and easy life.
It's summer. We're supposed to be having fun.
Luckily for Eddie and Stan, they get a reprieve as Ben hurtles in. Meanwhile, we see as Patrick experiences his last moments on Earth. He whips out his lighter and aerosol can, just like how he was going to burn Ben on the bridge. We can also see Tom from Tom and Jerry on his shirt, which is also owned by Warner Brothers. Setting a light to the spray, this is actually an Easter egg from the book. The Bowers gang had a chapter where they would light each other's farts while Bev sat around and spied on them. Yep, no wonder the book is over 1,000 pages long. Did that chapter need to be in the book, King? Hochstadter's death, though, is actually very different at the source material as he dies near his fridge in the novel. Along with baby murder, he also tortured animals and kept them in an old fridge. After he serviced Henry, he wanted to take it further. However, Bowers threatened to expose his fridge of experiments if he told anyone about their intimate moment. As such, Patrick went to clear the evidence, but was attacked by Pennywise, who appeared in the form of a swarm of leeches. They were the only thing he was scared of, and this is because when he was a kid, some got stuck to him in a river. Here though, he's terrified of zombies, and we see he's startled by the bodies of the missing kids, with 2 of them wearing Derry Tiger tops. This is the school's football team, which was also mentioned in 11/22/63. Now, Patrick being located in the sewers, that isn't just a change to make it scarier, it's actually a direct nod to that novel. Or at least I think it is. That book sees a man going back in time to try and stop the assassination of JFK. He ends up in an alternate version of Derry where Patrick was found dead in the sewers by some kids. So yeah, possibly a nod to that. The trademark balloon then appears with it saying, "I heart Derry." In the book, this was actually written on the hat that Adrian Mellon wore, and the slogan also returns at the start of chapter 2. The kids then help Ben go and get fixed up by riding their bikes to Keen's pharmacy. In the book though, Ben waited by the dam while Bill went to get some medicine. For Eddie, he was apparently having an asthma attack and needed his inhaler filled to help him settle down. He was basically kind of hyperventilating, but then calmed down, and then when they brought the inhaler back, he started going crazy again. They did that and he calmed down because it was a gazebo. It was all a gazebo. Sorry, a placebo. But yeah, here Eddie's petrified of the AIDS epidemic, saying his mum's friend got AIDS from touching a dirty pole in New York. Which of course isn't how it transfers. However, that was something people believed in at the time, and it was only when, like, I think Princess Diana came out and held a child's hand who had AIDS that people started to lose the stigmatism around the virus. Naturally though, his mother's been using this sort of thing to scare and control her son. Inside the pharmacy, we then see Eddie pick up each of the things they need. However, they only have a handful of dollars. His mum has an account though, but his mum will kill him if she finds out what they're doing. He says she'll have him in the emergency room, which is also something that he says in the book. It's here though that they finally meet Bev. She's in there buying pads and runs into the boys while trying to avoid Greta. As the boys try and run out with the bandages, she distracts Mr. Keene by saying he looks like Clark Kent. He then says she looks like Lois Lane when trying on his glasses.
I'm getting the word. Nonce.
It's just so messed up that the girl who's abusing her at school, her dad's also trying to abuse her, and it basically paints out the town as being very messed up. You can see that she also looks really zoned out as he bends over to pick up the mess, and this is likely because she's having to play up to the same kind of creep her dad is. Eddie, who clearly has experience with medicine, and patches up Ben as Bev runs across them. As we see her walk down the street, we can also see a missing persons poster for Jonathan Chan. This is a reference to John Chan, aka the second assistant art director. Now their meeting and her basically coming into the group, that's completely different in the book. There she met Ben outside school and then joined up with Richie and Ben when they went out to the cinema. It's here that they had a massive showdown against Bowers and his gang, and then basically one-upped them, and it was their first time standing up to bullies and showing they could do it. Bill has an instant crush on here though, and he thanks her for helping them. From his point of view, she walks in slow motion, and it's a lot like when Rich sees Marge in Welcome to Derry. Now begins the weird love triangle where Bev thinks that Bill sent the postcard. Ben also teases Ben, asking if they've got the right stuff to fix them up, with the right stuff of course being a New Kids on the Block song.
That's the name of another New Kids on the Block song.
Yeah mate, we know. Stop fucking taking my job. Ben is cut up really badly though, and when I think about it, he's definitely going to need some new clothes. Why not check out our merch store right below the video? There we've just launched lots of Welcome to Derry shirts, including the Deadlights one, which is one of my favourite designs we've ever done. Look how good that is. That's of course based off the Thing poster, and you can get that and more with bigger discounts for the more you buy, all below the video. Thank you. Now, we then learn that there's a rumour that Bev slept with Henry, but in the book, this was revealed to be sexual assault. We then learn that Bev and Bill kissed in the school play in the 3rd grade, which Ben's clearly jealous about. We then cut to Bev's home, and there's a clown toy on the side. This of course looks a lot like Pennywise, and I feel like it's there to show that the clown kind of has an effect on Alvin Marsh. And that of course also looks over the TV, which is also influencing him. Alvin works at the Derry Home Hospital, just like the book, whereas in the miniseries he worked at the school. Now after her dad touches her hair in a very weird fashion, she then goes and cuts it in the bathroom. This is an act of defiance, as she wants to reject what her father likes about her. It's also the side of her vision later when she hears the kids down the drain. So her pain might lure Pennywise to attack her here. It makes her the perfect victim, and it's also where Pennywise grabs her before taking her to the sewers. She then goes to the boys in the quarry and jumps in first completely fearlessly. This helps her ignore her home life, and she realizes they're stronger together. Bill looks at her trying to be all coy, but she clearly notices him. It's here that they also see a turtle in the water, which again is another reference to maturing.
It's a turtle.
We then see the boys staring at Bev as Bust a Move by Young MC plays. This is an apt song, as it's all about how to approach a girl, which Ben desperately needs advice on. Richie roasts Ben for having books in his bag and asks about the postcard. He was of course enabled to post it due to Henry catching up with him, but as we later see, he slips it in Bev's bag. Now there's also a newspaper that mentions the ironwork explosion and the Bradley Gang massacre. Ben says that as he had no friends, he would hang out at the library and knows all the history of the town. We then learn about the fire at the Black Spot, which took place in 1962.
What's the Black Spot?
The Black Spot was a nightclub that was burned down years ago by that racist cult.
The place gets set up in Welcome to Derry, but it looks a lot different to the location here in the photo. Machete, you hack! We hear how it was burned down by the Legion of White Decency, though in the book, Pennywise was there as well. He appeared as a bird and killed lots of the racist and patrons alike. Bill then notices Bev's hair, but he ends up stuttering. Ben swoops in and compliments the change in her look, but I still feel like the love triangle thing is just the weakest part of the story, I would say. Ben then mentions that people disappear here 6 more times than the national average. That's also just counting adults, and when it comes to kids, it's much, much higher. Due to the Derry curse though, the missing kids are swept under the rug after each cycle. The killings are normally pinned on someone innocent, and in this case, they're going to be pinned on Henry Bowers. Well, he's not really innocent, he still kills his dad, but yeah, they pin a lot of crimes on the kid. Welcome to Derry in the book, though, goes some ways to explain this, and in the 1930 cycle, they blamed it on the Great Depression. There was theorized that the kids died due to malnutrition, or they simply ran away. This is also given a nod to in the book, where it talks about the cycle during that time. It was a depression. Most of them probably got tired of eating potato soup or going flat hungry at home and went off riding the rods looking for something better. During 1958, 127 children ranging in the age from 3 to 19 were reported missing in Derry. Was there a depression in 1958? I asked Chief Rademacher. No, he said. But people move around a lot, Hanlon. Kids in particular get itchy feet. Have a fight with their folks about coming in late after a date and boom, they're gone. I showed Chief Rademacher the picture of Chadalow, which had disappeared in the Derry News in April 1958. You think this one ran away after a fight with his folks about coming in late, Chief Rademacher? He was 3.5 when he dropped out of sight. Rademacher fixed me with a sour glance and told me it sure had been nice talking with me, but if there was nothing else, he was busy. I left. Which again, clearly plays into the curse and how adults will just look the other way. The kids then go to Ben's house to check out his research. Fittingly, we also see a missing persons poster is put up for Patrick Hockstetter. On the left of the poster, you can also see a lot of staples showing how many posters have been put up. And shoutouts to Seas World for that one. We can also see the train in the background, which passed over Maddie in episode 1 of Welcome to Derry. The kids then go to Ben's room as Richie and Eddie are talking about Michael Jackson.
Yeah, I heard he has like a roller coaster and like a pet chimp and like an old guy's fucking bones. Yeah.
They say he has a roller coaster, chimp, and some old guy's bones. He of course had his own amusement park, a pet named Bubbles, and even apparently wanted to buy the Elephant Man's remains. But that turned out to be a media lie. I do remember being a kid though, and talking about this quite a lot. Now Michael Jackson actually helped a lot in defeating Pennywise in the book, and you might remember that he came out with a song called Beat It. Hey, I said beat it! Hey! Ben's room is filled with lots of horrifying research though, and there's a sign that says beware of trains. Train lines were actually a big part of Derry right up until the Korean War. Some of the missing kids were thought to have jumped on a train and rode out of the city, so it is quite fitting to have it behind the missing poster of Patrick. Ben's dad also died in the Korean War during the book, and his ghost used to haunt him on the Barrens. We then see the Derry Township Charter, and in the book, a lot of settlers went missing in 1741, which was based on the Roanoke mystery in real life. Because of this, we know that Derry was formed in the movie timeline in 1719. We even see a drawing of this incorporation being signed and can see Pennywise amongst them. The book tells us how it crashed on Earth and then basically allowed the town to be built up around it. This gave it a constant supply of food and was basically like opening an all-you-can-eat buffet right beside its lair. The work even asks if an entire town can be haunted and then talks about the meaning of the word haunt itself. Now, while haunt is often associated with ghosts, a haunt also means somewhere that an animal constantly goes to for food. So it works perfectly when describing what Derry is. It is always present whenever there's a massacre, and though the Native Americans were blamed, it's clearly the creature.
The only clue was a trail of bloody clothes leading to the wellhouse.
So it sounds like Pennywise then dragged them down into his lair underground. This well is something we'll talk about later on, but it's what they ended up building 29 Nearbolt Street around. The scariest part then happens though, as it's revealed that Ben has a New Kids on the Block poster. Bill then starts to work things out though, as he asks where the wellhouse is while looking at the slides. Cutting to the missing posters, we then see one for Tanya McGowan. The name is a reference to the movie's art direction assistant, and we then go past the church on Nearbolt Street. In the book, this was where Mike went to school at, and we can hear gospel music coming from the inside. It's also a place that Veronica Grogan went to in the book, which is a name you'll likely recognise from Welcome to Derry. We then see Eddie on his own, and he's spooked by the house. It literally looks like the most stereotypical haunted house ever, and I can see why the kids would be afraid of it. The text even talks about how if anywhere in Derry's haunted for sure, then this is the place. He then drops his pills, and Pennywise shocks him in the form of a hobo leper. Picks up the red pill, which is Pennywise's colour, and scares him half to death. Now, as I'm sure you know, you bloody know it, mate, Pennywise turns into what you fear the most. In the book, Eddie was accosted by a hobo asking for change in the train yards, and since then, he's been holding up that trauma. So Pennywise knew what he was scared of and then conjured up that image. In the book, he's walking past and comes across the leper below the porch, who then asks him if he wants a blowjob. Which, yeah, you can't really put that in the movie. Eddie was always thought to be gay in the book, and though they didn't confirm it, even like in the 90s series, you do kind of get that read. And I've always taken that as basically Pennywise twisting his secret and making it scare him. The hobo's nose has completely fallen off, and he looks kind of alien, and would completely scare the shit out of you. Pennywise then appears, and I love the sudden cut to him from Eddie being chased. We see a bunch of balloons, and this is such an iconic shot that I think most people think about when they think about this movie. We can also see the cracks in Pennywise's head, and it's such a good effect. Eddie then manages to escape, but Pennywise has terrified him, and it's starting to salt the meat. It's from here that we then cut to Bev's and can see the playbill for The Frog Prince. It's a classic play about a prince who's been cursed and turned into a frog, and with the kiss from a princess, the prince is saved and turns back into a human. Spoiler alert. Now, because of what was said earlier in the movie, I do think this is the play that Bev and Bill kissed in. As we learn when they're clearing of the bathroom, Bev basically says, I've heard the rumours that I'm a whore, but you're the only person I've ever kissed. And yeah, I think her having this playbill shows how much that moment meant to her. Ben also goes through what's seen as a glow up as well, kind of like the frog, and you could view that as what Bev does for the character. Funnily enough, Ben actually kisses her to save her at the end, and it's sort of like a true love's first kiss from Sleeping Beauty and a reverse version of the play. But yeah, it's kept in plain sight in her bedroom and shows it was a very special moment for her. Now throughout the room there's also an insight into Bev's musical tastes, as there's a poster for the band The Replacements just above her bed. The Replacements is kind of like the Outcasts and the Second Choices and sort of, yeah. Could it play into Ben? Maybe, but I've always thought that they were kind of liked each other the most. Get the hell out of here, Bill! This love triangle shit! She then finds the postcard slipped into her bag. Due to her father's creepiness, she has to take it to the bathroom and she locks the door to make sure he can't get in. He does find it later on though, which sends him absolutely mental. It's probably the first time a boy's ever been romantic towards her though, and this is due to her reputation. Betty Ripson then talks to her through the sink along with the other missing kids, so it destroys her moment of happiness. Now they name themselves as Betty, Veronica Grogan, and also Patrick Hockstetter. In the book, Veronica was one of Bev's friends at school, but they obviously altered it for Welcome to Derry. Now, why this moment's so bad is because Pennywise is basically corrupting her safe space. When we first saw Bev in the movie, she was hiding from the world in a toilet cubicle, and she goes to this bathroom to get away from her dad. So Pennywise has infiltrated her place of sanctuary here, and he covers the place in blood. Also, don't think it's a coincidence that she tried to sneak into the apartment with her Tampax. Alvin wants her to stay a little girl, but she's now turning into a woman, so this blood carries its own darker meaning about menstruation. She should seek help from her father, but he's fast asleep, so she goes to try and see how far the pipe goes down. When I was rewatching this as well, I did wonder if the green used throughout the bathroom was a direct nod to The Shining, as it's similar to the colour scheme used in room 237. The elevator river of blood is of course a massive moment in that movie as well, so they do kind of give a nod to it here with the big blood explosion. She's also grabbed by hair, which is similar to the cut hair that she put down the plug. She gets herself free, but when Alvin bursts in, he can't see the blood, which is another example of Pennywise isolating the children. This works as a metaphor for victims of abuse who often aren't believed by the people in authority. Or they are, but the person looks the other way. He also notices her haircut and says it makes her look like a boy. In another great cut, the water dripping from Bill's ceiling makes water on the paper, which causes the red to run like blood. And hey, that's a pretty good drawing there, mate. Proper captured her likeness there. Either way, it's his turn for a scare, and when he's out in the hallway, the lights turn on in Georgie's room. You can see a Lego turtle on the bedside table, which once again is a direct reference to Maturin. Also on the table is an animal circus toy, complete with a cart. The cart is similar to Pennywise's, and might be why the clown tried to entice Georgie through using the circus. We then hear someone running, and there's muddy footprints that lead down into the basement. The walkie-talkie then startles Bill, which leads him to drop the turtle. And he sort of casts aside the protection of Maturin. Now this moment is slightly different to the book, and Bill had his own sort of blood explosion thing. This happened when he flicked through a photo album of Georgie, and then the picture winked at him. Throwing the book to the floor in fright, it then started pouring blood, and both his parents were unable to see it. And yeah, I can totally get why you wouldn't want to just repeat the Bev scene with Bill. Going downstairs, we can then see recipes as well as flies for Cypress Gardens. This was a theme park in Florida that the family once visited, but unfortunately it's now closed. We see them at it later on during the scene with the slides, and it's ironic that there's a photo of them on a log flume as Georgie went missing down the sewers. It's a reach, I'll admit it. Just like Georgie though, Bill's scared of what's down there in the basement, and it appears to be flooded. I did wonder if this kind of showed that, at the start when he's pretending to be sick and he sends Georgie off to go and get the wax in the basement, was Bill doing that because he was terrified of going down there? And yeah, it kind of just recontextualizes that scene in hindsight. He then walks down the stairs, and there's what looks to be a figure at first with red trousers below them. We then spot Georgie standing in the corner, and the way his eyes shine in the light are a lot like Pennywise's. It's horrifying as Georgie starts to decay, and Pennywise appears like it's something out of Apocalypse Now. Its hands behind Georgie like some sort of horrible ventriloquism act, and the pair say, "You'll float too," before it slams him in the water. We then cut to Bev, who's sitting on the fire escape waiting for her friends. She's called them for help and to see if they can also see the blood in the bathroom. Just like the book, they go up the back way, and this is so no one sees a load of boys going through the front. Also love the subtle detail of her running down the steps and there's just a kid sat there by themselves. And they do look a bit too young to be out there on their own, especially when so many kids go missing. So to me that highlights how little the parents care. But yeah, the parent might be out having to work, they might not lock the kid in all day, but yeah, the kid's just been left alone and something could happen in this town. Now in the book, this scene actually happens after the kids hung out with a guy named Bradley who was a bit of a dick. Beverly beat him at Marvel's and he screamed at her mother was a whore. However, she replied by saying, she's not a whore, she's a waitress, which made all the kids burst out laughing. Kinda just endeared her to the gang and showed she does stand up for people. Now as the kids open the door and see the blood, Eddie's chatting away and his t-shirt might be an Easter egg. It's a car with a creepy smile and it might be a reference to King's other work, Christine. The Plymouth Fury was the car that took Henry to the hotel in the book, while it was a Trans Am in chapter 2. But yeah, could it all be connected? Could not. Bill then says they can't leave it like this, whereas it was Stanley who suggested cleaning it up in the book. Eventually though, they managed to get the blood down, and the book mentions how even the worst stains seem like a pastel pink on the wall. Bev reassured herself that she could in fact live with that, but I think it represented how the trauma never fully went away. As they clean up, we then hear 6 different ways by the Cure. This represents each of the connections she has with the other boys. Also like to think of it as a sadder connection to the story though. Despite being the best of friends and working with each other like we see here, the group eventually lose touch and go their separate ways. But yeah, it's very important this gets cleaned up, and though Alvin can't see the blood, this is all for Beverly's benefit. The kids again help her get over her trauma, and it shows that when they work together, they can defeat Pennywise. Simply by removing what it did, it's their first step to conquering the crazy eldritch demon thing. Ben then sees the postcard in her bedroom, but then sees Bill and Bev laughing. They're talking about the Derry Summer Fair, and this might be an annual event, which is what we see in chapter 2. However, they do have an Independence Day one later, so I'm guessing that it's that. She then says how she's only been kissed by one guy, and that's Bill. All the rumours were false, but he has no idea what she means when she recites the poem. If only you'd waited a few more seconds, Ben. Richie then gets called Trash Mouth, which is a nickname he has in the book. Bill then shares that he saw Georgie and Pennywise, and the kids also have clearly had run-ins as well. It's sort of a metaphor for how abuse often goes undetected and committed to lots of different people at a systemic level. However, when one person opens up, the rest normally gain their strength to speak up as well. Out of the group, everyone's seen the clown except Richie, who has yet to see it. He says this.
Wait, can only virgins see this stuff? Is that why I'm not seeing this shit?
Which did remind me a lot of Jay from The Inbetweeners.
Oh right, and what did she do to you when you were 12 that was so filthy? Well, when I her, she shit down my arm.
The kids don't all share exactly what happened, but they discuss it all later near the Paul Bunyan statue. Now in the book, Stanley actually encountered Pennywise at the standpipe, which is while he was birdwatching. He was locked in and heard something moving around in there with him and tried to bang against the door, but he couldn't escape. It was only upon shouting out the bird names that the door suddenly opened and he managed to get out. The kids then spot Belcher's car and also Mike's bike. There's a sign that says Kenduskeag Trail as well, which is the name of the stream that runs through the Barrens. The Kenduskeag itself ran through King's home in Maine and was a further connection to his life. The kids are very hesitant to go and help though, until Bev makes them. Also love how the kids just drop their bikes while Stanley uses a kickstand. Gotta look after it, keep it in good condition. We then see Mike's face is being pushed into his meat delivery and he's obviously resisting it. However, he looks up to see Pennywise happily chewing away on an arm. Annie Muschietti confirmed that this is indeed Eddie Cochran's arm, who was the character we spoke about earlier. In the book and movie, the kids say that Eddie's hand was found all chewed up near the standpipe, so this is a little nod to that.
They say they found part of his hand all chewed up near the standpipe.
Henry is absolutely rabid here, and it shows his descent into madness is being furthered by Pennywise. The fight is also in a different location here than in the book, as in the source material it took place at the quarry. The novel also featured Henry trying to terrorize Mike with an M80 firework. But here things are a lot simpler. Mike of course had reservations over killing the sheep, and I'm guessing this is sheep guts that he's forcing his face into, so very messed up. In the book, Henry also tries to negotiate with the Losers Club and says that if they hand Mike over, no harm will come to them. They of course say no, and I love this moment as it shows that when they're united, the kids can stand up against anything. They managed to beat the bullies for the first time ever, and with Mike joining them, they've reached their full power. We see how the bullies are completely outnumbered now as well, but in the book, they had an extra 2 members. Those were named Moose Sadler and Peter Gordon, but yeah, I think it makes more sense to play up the strength in numbers thing that they're clearly doing at this point in the film. Ben's furious at Henry for implying he slept with Bev, and he pelts him with a rock, which did remind me of him saying in the book that you don't throw rocks at girls. As the fight goes on, we then hear Antisocial by Anthrax, calling back to Belch's shirt from earlier. Absolutely cracked up at this shot when the kids are clearly in front of a green screen as well, and it looked worse than the miniseries that did. But yeah, they beat them in the end, and for now, Henry's been vanquished. Now, there is a read on the story that Pennywise isn't actually real, and Henry's the true villain and evil in the movie. Similar to Kiefer Sutherland in Stand By Me, he's the one who causes all the hurt and pain, beyond their parents. You could see the clown as being something the kids conjured up in their minds to cope with the relentless bullying and abuse, and when they're older, they don't really remember what happened, and might even imagine something like this to explain it. I do feel like this theory might have some weight to it, as even in the book, the kids say Henry's a thing that they all have in common. Henry, of course, is who they also fight at near Bolt Street at the end, and though they go into the sewers, they could have imagined it. And we then see them making their way with the train in the background, which is a shot that gets repeated in part 2 and also Welcome to Derry. Trains often symbolise moving forward together, which is what the kids are now doing. Though each carriage is different, they're all on the same track now, moving in the same journey towards the same goal. And united as one, just like a train. Richie even says at this point,
Welcome to the Losers Club!
So I love this shot of the kids walking in a line with the train also moving in a line behind them. Now I did Google trains in it to see if there were any other potential meanings, and the top result was about the Losers Club running a train on Beverly. Whew, which yeah, if you've read the book, then you'll know that's how they escaped the sewers, and yeah, I repressed that memory myself, I did. Thank you, Stephen King, for your great works. But it is a very, very weird scene in there. Yeah, King rightly still gets shit for it today. It's so fucking weird. Either way, we then cut to a parade celebrating Independence Day. That is, of course, July 4th, and we can see on the poster of Eddie that he's been missing for 3 days. Bill says Betty's been forgotten about, and the town's kind of moved on to the next missing person. Even her missing poster's been covered up by Eddie's, and if you look at the wall behind Betty's, then you can see there's lots of other posters behind it as well, which is really, really chilling. The kids going missing has almost become normalized, and the older I've got, the more I've realized people do move on from things after quite a short time. You might also notice the poster of the kids next to it talking about the barbecue, and yeah, using kids on a thing advertising food could be a twisted little nod to what Pennywise likes to eat. Ben then brings up the clear pattern of all the big events in Derry. Pennywise attacks every 27 years, and there's always a major disaster that goes along with it. We then cut to them in front of the Paul Bunyan statue, and King based this on the real-life statue of the legendary lumberjack that exists in Bangor, Maine. In the book, the residents were furious at the statue, as they found it very tacky and crap. People protested it, they constantly threw eggs at it, and this is something that we saw during Welcome to Derry. Mike then mentions how his grandfather thinks the town is cursed and that the evil's down to one thing. In Welcome to Derry, we learn that Leroy came into contact with Pennywise, and it sounds like he's tried to warn Mike over the airs. I mean, you could have moved, couldn't you, mate? Well, no, not really. In the book, we learn that people can't simply leave the town, and it takes a certain kind of person with mental fortitude to break Pennywise's pull. Hence why so many of the Losers Club go on to be extremely successful. Stanley then says that none of this is real, and Mike explains his encounter that involved his parents. He says it was the house on Harris Avenue, which might be a reference to Emily Harris or Matthew Harris, who worked on the movie. Also, kind of killed me how Stan talks about the creepy flute woman, and Richie's first question is like, yeah dude, but seriously, how hot is she, bro?
She hot?
No, Richie. She's not hot.
Just want you to stop saying odd shit.
We then finally learn what Richie's scared of, and it is of course clowns. He looks at the one on stage and comes into contact with Pennywise at this location during chapter 2. The clown's outfit is also very reminiscent of the notorious killer John Wayne Gacy. Gacy's killings were revealed to the world around the release of the book, but King has denied that Pennywise was based on him. I don't even think it's a case of like him seeing it as being distasteful, as the work was well underway while Gacy was moving undetected. However, because of the similarities between the killer clown and a book about a killer clown, people of course drew comparisons. So it just makes sense to give that a nod in the movies. Now I've always taken this clown as being Pennywise, and it's taunting Richie similar to the librarian. As we learn in chapter 2, right after this moment, he tried to make friends with Henry Bauer's cousin. So yeah, this scene is very important in hindsight. The kids then try and map out the atrocities using a map of the town sewers over the top of it. It allows them to basically triangulate what's happening and work out the epicenter is 29 Neobolt Street. The tunnels underground allow the creature to move, and every disaster is connected by this system. This moment's very similar to the book, as in that Bill worked out it was moving through the sewers. The creature infects the city by shedding in the water, and this allows it to spread out into the town. The book also says there's something weird about Derry, and they describe it as always feeling like it's 13 o'clock, which is a description I always loved. They also talk about how dreams are the escape from Derry, and Derry itself's a nightmare. In one of the interludes, Mike discovers that lots of people have reported that there's voices coming from the drains, and one even said, "I am Legion," which Mike realised is what the devil says in the Bible. Now in the book, after the leper attacked Eddie, Bill and Richie went to the house, where it attacked them as well, yay! They came across the werewolf before them being chased by the clown itself. Now this scene replaces the photo album section of the book, and then Mike used his dad's photo album to show the kids the history of Derry, much like Ben did earlier in the movie. The album then comes alive, just like it did earlier in the story, with a picture of Georgie. Pennywise then taunts the group and says he'll kill them all, which he later got Henry to say. Now in this scene, the kids look over all of the photos, and there was a line that's really stuck with me. They see a photo of Georgie and basically think about how he'll stay 6 forever. He'll never get better at colouring, never grow taller, he'll always just be this kid in the photos. They also notice red marks around the pages, which they initially think is from ketchup on Georgie's fingers as he was flipping through the book. However, quickly they realise it's blood. I love the scene in the film though, and what they do with the slides, and it's got a great jump scare in it. Just seeing Pennywise giant takes things to the next level, and you couldn't have really done this sort of effect in the miniseries. It definitely feels like a nod to The Ring as well, as we had Sadako climbing out the TV. On Richie's shirt, we can also see the word freezes. This is actually a reference to the department store in the book, which he ran into to escape from Henry Bowers. Eddie's also rocking a cool shirt that firmly places us in 1989 as it features the cast of Airwolf. Bill then rushes off to Nearbolt Street himself to face it and try and find his brother. He uses a line about posts to calm himself, and he says they don't have to go with him. I feel like the change to have Bill searching for his brother adds a bit more urgency though, and the focus to his story. In the book, he simply just wants revenge and wants to grab his dad's gun and go and shoot it in the head. But there is some doubt amongst the group if it would even have an effect. Upon arriving at the house, they then recapture the book perfectly. Though the number's never mentioned by name, I love how the gate has the number 29 on it. In the book, they also mention how the windows look like eyes, and Stan touches the bird book in his back pocket for a bit of good luck. The novel says there's an overturned trike in the yard, and glass from the broken windows all about the garden. Now what this shows is that something broke out from the inside instead of something breaking in. Stan then mentions having someone on watch, like outside of Bev's. Bill asks who wants to stay, and everyone raises their hand, except Beverly, because yeah, she's ride or die with Bill at this point. Eddie and Richie are the ones who end up going in, and it reminds me of the book as Bill and Richie went to the house after Eddie told them about the leper. Richie then sees a missing poster with his face on it, and Pennywise messes with his head. This also sort of comes from the book, as he notices a jacket that has his name on it. As he scans the poster, we can also see the date says July 4th, and knowing that this is the day today, you can see why it hits him a little bit harder. The kids then see Betty rips him before she's dragged away. Eddie's then targeted as Pennywise speaks to him in the leper's voice, which separates him from the other two. He huffs on his inhaler, which, though just a placebo, helps him to ward the clown away. Placebos are of course all mental, and Pennywise attacks through this, so it's a similar sort of thing. The floor then collapses in front of him, and the leper causes him to fall through the ground. His pill alarm then goes off, just like it did during his first encounter with the creature. Richie's then led into a room full of clowns, which even to someone who doesn't really find clowns that scary, would be absolutely terrifying. On the left we can see a nod to Tim Curry's version, and on the right we can see Skarsgård's version as well, so it's a nice way to show the past and present. The clown at the door also scares him with his eyes looking in different directions, just like Pennywise. Now I love how you can hear his heartbeat pounding away as Richie grows scared. It then fades when he thinks he's in the clear, and this is right before the coffin opens. There's a doll of a dead Richie, rotten and gross, and then Pennywise leaps out and says, "Beep beep Richie. Beep beep Richie." This was something his friends would say in the book when he was doing like 40 impressions in a row and fucking doing your head in. And yeah, if you've ever listened to the audiobook, mate, it'll kill you. It'll kill you a bit. It's a bit of a chore. Richie and Bill then see Eddie's head come out the mattress. Just like the book, dark goo comes out of his mouth and then spreads across the room. Meanwhile, as this is going on, the real Eddie wakes up and realizes his arm is broken. In the book, his arm actually gets broken by Henry Bowers, which happens right after the rock fight. Henry breaks his arm in revenge for what went down at the quarry, but if you read it, thinking of Henry being Pennywise, then you can see how that could apply here. Pennywise then appears again to Eddie. He comes out of a fridge, and it's just like how Stan's had appeared to the Losers Club in the book as adults, which they brought across to the miniseries and also Chapter 2. Eddie is completely helpless at this point, and it's almost like he's being served up on a plate.
Yeah, boy.
Pennywise also says,
Tasty, tasty, beautiful fear.
If you've watched some of the behind the scenes stuff on the film as well, you know how the kids were constantly messing around with Skarsgård, and he'd immediately drop character after terrifying the shit out of them. Shoots like this, moments like this, he was getting very, very scary, but then he'd drop the act and just help lighten the mood. Now upstairs, we see that they get 3 doors, which is kind of similar to the book where they had the option in the house there. Although, here it's more like a haunted house trick with each one being labelled. The red writing on the door appears similar to how red rum's written in The Shining, and we can also see the blood floating upwards. Anytime you see Pennywise get struck, his blood also floats up as well, and it just adds into the surreal feeling of the movie. In the not scary at all door, they then find Betty Ripsom's torso. Bill maintains that this isn't real, and this breaks his spell, which allows them to leave. However, Pennywise has another trick up his sleeve. He mocks Bill by saying it was real enough for Georgie, and this clearly gets to the character. Luckily, Bev arrives and spears it through the head, kind of setting up what she does at the end in the cistern. This is also similar to the book where Bev was the one who landed a hit on Pennywise. However, here she uses an iron poker as opposed to the slingshot from the story. Pennywise then looks scared as the blood floats up. During this part of the book, we then get a section from Pennywise's point of view, and it finally realizes it might actually be killed. For once in its life, it's feeling fear, and the Losers Club are basically using fear as a weapon against it. Because of this, it ends up going wild and ends up retreating. The drool starts to drip down its mouth, and then a claw pops out of its hand. In the glove, Pennywise was a werewolf here, and this long claw-like hand also looks a lot like that. I also feel like this is possibly giving a nod to the VHS cover from the original 90s miniseries, as the claw was on that, and it terrified me as a kid. I'll remember it to this day. I remember forever. I never forget. In the book, it also appeared as the mummy and even Frankenstein's monster. Sadly, most of those creatures get skipped over, but it was all giving nods to the universal monsters which King said scared him as a kid. Ben also gets clawed just like the book, but it makes its retreat. Bill doesn't want to let it get away, and he rushes down the stairs, which is when he sees the well. I love this moment though, and it's so creepy watching it descend. And again, I get a lot of vibes of Sadako in The Ring, just in the opposite direction. Now, we also had a deleted scene here that showed the kids evacuating the house and taking Eddie with them. Instead, we just see as they leave and get a jump cut to Eddie's mum going absolutely mental, and you even call him Bev a slut and stuff. Fucking weird. Eddie's mum basically blames the kids, and she ends up taking him to hospital. But to be fair, there is actually something wrong with him at this point. The group then argue here, which is actually different to the book, where they're mostly in agreement that they need to take down Pennywise. I did chuckle though when Richie says,
I'm sorry, who invited Molly Ringwald into the group?
That is of course referencing the 80s movie icon who was in the Breakfast Club, which clearly influenced parts of this movie. The fear is working though, and Richie and Bill fight. Richie basically says, look mate, Georgie is fucking dead, you need to accept it. I'm not getting killed myself. Let's enjoy summer. Boo woo! However, there was no escaping the clown, and as we learn in chapter 2, the kids all had more encounters after this. For the moment though, it's basically the part in Act 2 where the group all go their separate ways, you know that bit in the movie, and we hear the song Dear God by Ecstasy. It's a great montage about isolation and loneliness. We see how Mike has accepted his fate and kills the sheep, all while looking completely lost and apathetic. The curse is starting to work on him, and he's succumbing to Derry. Ben is also back in the library alone, and we see as he looks up at a painting on the wall. There was a woman in the book who lost her baby at the standpipe under the influence of Pennywise, so it might be referring to that. However, there was a deleted scene as well that kind of built off this moment and showed some of the early settlers in Derry. The woman was going to the well, and Pennywise promised to leave them alone if she handed over the baby. She did, and thus her village was safe. For now, anyway. It's kind of a similar thing to Henry bargaining with Mike, but I think since they cut that they cut this as well. We then see Bev in the bathroom as she sees there's still a tiny spot of blood on the floor. To me, it indicates that the work is not done yet and the group needs to reform. Cutting to August, we then see Henry's gotten even crazier and he tries to shoot a cat. In the book, beyond Mike's dog, he also tortured other animals, which this is possibly a reference to. There's also a deleted scene where we actually saw his room complete with his weapons. It's something I think that they should have added to give a bit more texture to the bully, but what this moment gives us though is a first first-hand look into why Henry's the way that he is. His dad arrives and shoots at his feet to humiliate him in front of his friends.
Look at him now, boys. Ain't nothing like a little fear to make a paper man crumble.
Henry's dad is controlling through fear, and while Henry does the same thing, Pennywise does as well. Cutting to Eddie, we then see his arms in a cast after his fall. The book has a fairly long part that sees him go to the emergency room, but it's not yet. Possibly because it's pointless. He's been to the hospital, you can tell. His mum said that's where they were going. He came out with a cast. Shorthand. Greta then tells Eddie that his medication's a placebo, and in the books, Mr. Keene tries to do it with kindness by explaining he doesn't need any of his medicine. Here though, she's doing it to make fun of him and destroy his worldview. She's a bully just like Bowers, and a reason that the Losers Club unite. She even writes loser on his cast. Eddie does seem a bit smitten by her at first though, and the book explains that he literally went on to marry his mother. And yeah, the woman who plays his mother here plays his wife in chapter 2. Read into that what you will. In the book though, his mum was elated that he fell out with his friends, but now everyone just sees him as a loser. We then cut to Henry, who's hit rock bottom since the rock fight. His dad's embarrassed him in front of his friends, he's sitting alone isolated, and this is when Pennywise makes his move. His connection to the character is shown in lots of subtle details, and that begins with him wearing a red shirt. This is furthered by the red balloon above his red mailbox, and the knife also comes inside of a red box. This is the one that he lost in the Barrens earlier, and you can even see all the dirt and leaves around it. Pennywise makes his move through the TV show, and when the host moves out the way, we can see the clown behind her. Around him are also the missing kids, including Betty Ripsome. Henry then kills his dad, and he goes fully to the dark side. As this is going on, Bev goes out, which is when she sees her dad's padlock the door. He ends up attacking her, and a similar thing happens in the same room with Mrs. Kirsch in the future. Well, Pennywise, not Mrs. Kirsch, but Pennywise, you know what I mean. Just like Henry, Alva Marsh is also under Pennywise's spell, and this is indicated by the red chair and undershirt. In the book, Bev then escaped this and ran into Henry and his goons. However, here she smashes her dad like the like button and then gets grabbed by the clown. Kinda reduces her character, and she basically becomes just a damsel in distress, instead of being like the crack shot in the book. Bill then goes to her apartment and sees her dad, along with a message, "You'll die if you try." This is actually a reference to something Bev hears when she puts a tape measure down the sink. Bill then rushes to get the gang back together, and the cinema is showing Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The Dream Child. Both stories are of course very, very similar, with a supernatural child killer hunting a group of teenagers. Both Pennywise and Freddy are iconic characters as well that also attack people through using fears in their mind. Stephen King was actually approached to write the movie, but he ended up passing on it. New Line Cinema though, which produced this movie, are also said to be the house that Freddy built. It's a nice little Easter egg.
Nice.
Andy Muschietti did actually consider Freddy for one of Pennywise's forms, but ultimately in the end he decided to go against it. However, it would of course played into the whole movie monster thing that the original book's full of. We then cut to Eddie, and I love having the detail of a missing kid on the milk carton. This is obviously something, that happens in real life, but in the context of the movie, I think it works really well. Basically, it just shows how the kids will never escape. We also see that he's turned the writing on his cast to lover, which was going to be shown in a deleted scene. Might be a reach here, but the V, it splits two letters. There's an E and an R next to each other, which might be Eddie and Richie, and chapter 2 basically says Richie loves Eddie. Might be a reach as well. Eddie's mum then tries to stop him using her method of control, just like how Alvin tried to do it to Bev. Doesn't work here though, and they end up uniting.
They're gazebos! They're bullshit!
The gazebos! Mike also grabs his bolt gun, and though he was originally scared of it, he's now using it as a weapon. In the book, Richie has sneezing powder, and the gang basically all bring items that make them feel stronger. At the house, Richie then picks up a bottle, and this says Bob Gray. This is the moniker Pennywise took from the original Dancing Clown, and again, it's another nod to Albert Fish. We also see as Henry's watching them, but he's there without his friends. Now, there was actually a deleted scene that would have revealed that he killed all his mates. He's basically there sitting in his car, and this is how the police could pin the other kids' deaths on him. Now in the book, it's at this point that they decide to use the ritual of Chud. During their research before the first fight, they used a smoke hole to induce a vision of Pennywise landing on Earth. This was of course featured in chapter 2, and King was taking a lot of drugs at the time and a lot of smoke holes himself. But through that they learn the ritual of Chud, and in the book this was a Himalayan practice where someone goes to take out a glamour or a talus. In this ritual, they overlap their tongue with the creature and then tell each other a riddle, and whoever laughs first loses the game. If the glamour lost, got banished for 100 years, and thus people would be safe for 3 cycles. In the book, Bill engages this with Pennywise telepathically, and he gets help from the turtle maturing. It's something that's really hard to even explain now, and in a movie, especially the first film where you're kind of setting the groundwork, best to just skip over it. Inside the house, we then see the words, "Good cheers, good friends." Shows how the place was corrupted by the pure evil beneath it, and ties directly into this group of kids. Cutting to Bev, we then see red blood dropping down. It's very similar to how the water dripped down from Bill's ceiling and landed on the picture of Bev. She's down in the cistern, and here she sees all the toys and bikes left by the kids who've been brought down here by Pennywise. It's all surrounding Pennywise's cart and highlighting that the evil emanates from that. Reminds me a lot of belongings that you'd see from the Holocaust, where people's possessions would just be thrown into a pile. We then get probably the most memorable scene from the movie, other than the opening. A jack-in-the-box winds up, and then out of it a Pennywise model appears. The cart door then drops, and we see Pennywise the dancing clown living up to his name.
My name is Nathaniel.
Can we dance?
I like to dance.
The dance is similar to the Take the L from Fortnite, but this released first, so they clearly stole it. You bloody nicked it. I love how it just shows how much joy it gets from being the clown though, and out of all of its forms, this is clearly the favourite. Bev then makes a dash, but the clown grabs her and its mouth then expands. We see rows and rows and rows of teeth and also the deadlights at the centre. You can also hear the screams of the kids coming from its mouth. I did wonder if this was the souls of the people it had transfixed, and we see this process going on with Beverly. The book says that if one gazes at the deadlights, they can go insane, and this just makes her completely tap out mentally and go like a deer in the headlights. Meanwhile, Mike's attacked by Henry and he traps the rest of the kids in the well. He's fully possessed by Pennywise, and this is shown by the blood on his face. It's been done to look just like the clown's red makeup and is such a great design choice. And again, playing into the fact that maybe Pennywise was Henry and they just made it up. Mike is then almost killed by his worst fear, the bolt gun. Luckily, he overcomes this and pushes it out the way. It all kind of calls back to Leroy's speech at the beginning and how he can be on either side of the gun. He then pushes Henry out the movie, and originally they planned to show that he was still alive, but they thought they would just leave it ambiguous and save it for chapter 2. The kids then work their way down, and Pennywise taunts them throughout the tunnels. Stan is then attacked by the painting lady, which might be why he never returns further down the line. He was definitely the closest to being eaten, like he was pretty much getting his face chewed on, and I can imagine it wasn't that enjoyable. Also, it kind of kills me how Pennywise crawls back up as the woman and then pops its head back round and just gives a little insert shot. Great shot that though. Stan then freaks out and blames his friends for leaving them, and it kind of lays the groundwork for why he refuses to return for them. He just doesn't have the connection and friendship that they do. Bill then sees his brother and gives chase, and there was a deleted scene where the kids find Georgie's walkie-talkie. Meanwhile, I think the others find where Patrick Hockstetter died, as there's lots of zombie-looking kids. They then make their way through, and everyone converges in attempts to wake up Bev. Now, I think this might be Mushy Eddie's attempt to bring Audra's story from the book. In that, in case you don't know, Bill's future wife ends up following him to Derry, only to then be kidnapped by Bev's abusive husband. That guy's Tom Rogan, and Tom thought Bev was going to Derry to meet up with Bill and have an affair with him, which led to him being corrupted by Pennywise. Audra was then taken into the depths by the clown and sent into a catatonic state. She then had to be snapped out of it with an epilogue, and you will see that scene if you go and watch the miniseries. Ben's kiss then wakes Bev up, and she realizes who actually sent the postcard. But whoa, mate! Haven't you read 75 BuzzFeed articles about how problematic that Sleeping Beauty is, mate? Shouldn't be doing that, mate. She did not consent, you piece of shit. Cancel Ben. To be fair, though, it's a lot tamer than the moment where they basically have a gangbang with Bev in the sewers.
I'm getting the word nonce.
But yeah, skip over that in every adaptation ever from now on. Bill then spots his brother with a boat and also a missing arm. However, he realizes he's not Georgie.
I couldn't keep up with it.
She, Georgie. You call both she.
This of course calls back to the line from earlier, but I do think it has another meaning. I couldn't keep up with it is also potentially referring to the creature and how Georgie couldn't keep up with it. Him not remembering the conversation about the boat also clues Bill into how he's not his brother. So he fights back. This is Bill rejecting his trauma and grief and slowly overcoming what happened to his brother. He shoots Pennywise and Georgie then turns to the creature. But we can see its eyes are red, showing how it's damaged. Now, the screeching we hear there is actually Georgie's last words playing in reverse. Bill then goes for another shot, but the gun isn't loaded.
It's not loaded. Hey, it's not loaded!
How about Bill still pulls the trigger and it still has an impact? His belief that it's loaded is what makes him able to fire. This is just like how Eddie uses the asthma inhaler and says that it's battery acid. They then attempt to use the spike again, but Pennywise isn't falling for that trick. Bill is then grabbed by the clown and he tries to make a deal. It says that if they leave Bill for Pennywise, then it will rest for 27 years and the rest can go and live happy little lives, great happy lives, and hit the thumbs up. Now, I do feel like this would have played off the well scene, but again, that wasn't included. What I love though is that even though they don't take this deal, they do go on to live happy lives. Well, some of them do. Some of them have happy lives, but some of them have shit ones. But yeah, in the book, it reveals that Pennywise did kind of push them towards success because if they were successful, they might not return to Derry. As we see though, the kids refuse and then go and kick its arse. It then begins to turn into the loser's worst fear before turning into the arachnid form that comes from the book. Also, did feel like this was kind of like the shape-shifting enemy defeated scene, and they do something similar at the end of Terminator 2. When Ben attacks, it also becomes like a mummy head, which is right out the book, albeit a bit earlier. In that he saw the spirit of his dad at the canal, and then Pennywise turned into the mummy and then tried to kill him.
That's my home now, son!
Which always killed me. I live here now, son. We also see the leper throw up on Eddie, and Finn, who plays Richie, suggested that be to his character as nothing really happens to him in this movie. The kids actually went deep down into its lair in the book, and this was via a small fairy tale door. This shows up during chapter 2, but I do like how they just bully Pennywise to death. He's beaten like that printer in Office Face, and then Bev finishes the job as it becomes her father. She uses some rebar for this, which is just like Nightmare on Elm Street 5. There Freddy was impaled through the throat, just like here. The creature then flees and says,
against the post, and still he sees the ghost.
Again, this is something Bill used to reassure himself, and he actually said it during the ritual of Chud. So it's probably doing it here to try and taunt the character's stutter. Now we see that Bill hesitates from finally finishing it off for good. This is something he also does in the book, despite Maturin saying, kill it for good. Pennywise then cracks and falls down the pipe, and the creature disappears for 27 years. This is similar how Mike pushed Henry down the well, and again I'm telling you mate, may have all just been Henry. Like Betty's shoe before, Bill then finds Georgie's raincoat, but he's now able to accept his loss and put it all behind him. It's over. For now. Now originally, Bill was going to climb up the giant tower, which would then lead to a fight in the cisterns. That would be Pennywise versus Bill in a 1v1, but I do prefer how they do it in the final cut. We then go to September, which is normally seen as being the end of summer, or the summer holidays at least. We can see the red bridge behind them, and the kids jump off this in the opening of Welcome to Derry. Bev then reveals that though they defeated it, she did have a vision of them fighting it in the future. It is revealed in some of the extended material that she didn't see Stan, which highlights that he won't return. Bill then makes him take a blood oath, and during this, I love how Eddie's medication alarm goes off. He obviously doesn't rush to take it though, instead he stands getting people's blood mixed into his blood, and it shows how he's grown and isn't held back by those placebos now. Also, blood oaths in general, yeah, you're gonna get infected, mate. I'm not even like a hypochondriac like that or OCD, you're gonna get infected. I remember I first saw one of these in The Indian in the Cupboard, I think it was, and it always takes me back to that movie and thinking like, what the hell is going on? I love this score here though, and seeing them all hold hands, make this oath is such a great moment. Just a great beautiful piece, and not really the sort of thing that you usually hear in horror movies. The group then go their own way, and it leaves just Bill and Bev. Well, Ben kind of hangs around until the end as well, and then leaves while they're sat down, and I'll have to admit, been there myself. It's a weird moment though, as Ben kisses Bev, as a sort of true love's kiss moment. And I know it calls back to their kiss from the play, but yeah, Ben did it before, so what are you trying to tell us? However, this is just done to keep that love triangle going in the future, and she says she never felt like she was a loser when she was hanging with her friends. She then goes off to live the rest of her life without them, and I do like how it's almost a sort of Stand By Me sort of ending where the kids just fade away. That movie, Stand By Me, was of course also based on the Stephen King story The Body, and I appreciated how this movie was basically like that with a monster. Now, there's actually a deleted ending scene in which Bill and his parents talk about going on holiday. The parents don't want to after Georgie's death. However, in the alternate ending, Bill goes off with them, and it shows that the family are overcoming what happened. They have finally accepted his death, and rather than staying in the house waiting for him to return, they've decided that, fuck the lad, we're going off. As they drive off, we also zoom in on the sewer drain, and the raindrops start to fall, indicating it's not over. Overall though, I think this is a really solid movie, and I would have actually have been alright if they never made chapter 2. That said, it's only half the story, and issues with some of the minor character changes aside, which I don't mind that much. I think this is a great film, and possibly one of the best, if not the best, coming-of-age story in a horror film. As for the sequel, we will be back to talk about it very, very soon, and I hope you'll stand by me on that one, mate. I know it's not stand by... Right, the joke's ruined. The fucking joke's ruined. If you've enjoyed this deep dive though, please hit the thumbs up and drop a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing as well, then make sure you follow us on Heavy Spoilers, where I'll tell you like breakdowns that we're working on that I'll probably release a month from when I post. But yeah, lots of things to do on there, and did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to those videos? If you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else, and it all goes towards helping breakdowns like this get made. Now if you want something else to watch, we have got the mini-series breakdown. We've done one of them, yeah, that went deep on that, so if you can't get enough of it, then why not go check out that. If not though, thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.